Hello, my dear friends. The smell hits you first like burnt honey left too long in the pan. You're standing at the edge of a dim hut somewhere deep in the jungle lowlands of the Visayas. Night has fallen, but the heat hasn't let up, and your skin sticks to itself beneath your arms. You peer inside. A woven mat lies on the floor, but the main attraction, what draws your eyes against your will, is the raised platform at the center. Draped in wildflowers, the body lies surrounded by coiled leaves, crushed ginger and smoking branches of burned sap. It's all supposed to mask the scent. But it doesn't. The cloying perfume of the dead hangs in the air like wet cloth, sweet and sticky, daring you to breathe through your nose. The scent of decay, earthy, metallic, sharp, curls under the layers of herbs like a whispered insult. It's not just a smell, it's a presence. It moves when you move. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Imagine this scene now. You're huddled in the shadows of a nepa hut, surrounded by flickering torches, the hiss of burning bark, the whispered songs of mourners, and a corpse laid out like royalty, rotting regally in real time. It's not the death you were taught to fear, it's more intimate, more performative, more pungent. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step over the threshold, and the scent deepens. This is how it begins. A body dies, and the living begin their work. In pre-colonial Philippines, death wasn't something to be rushed. You didn't cart a body off to a sterile mortuary, or tuck it neatly into a polished casket. You didn't scrub away the mess of dying. You invited it in. You dressed it up. You gave it center stage. And it all started with the smell. In many communities across the archipelago, especially among the Visayans, the first response to death was not embalming but smoking. Sap from trees like pili and camagong was thrown into fire pits to produce clouds of thick, resinous smoke. Herbs like demang maria and sambong were crushed and scattered, alongside ginger and turmeric, which were believed to ward off spirits and infection. For you, it smells like someone tried to cook spiced pork in a garbage fire. To them, it was sacred and necessary. The glamorous illusion. A floral, serene vigil filled with chanting and soft songs. The body dressed in its finest cloth, silk pettidiong, beaded headdresses, gold-plated teeth gleaming under firelight. From a distance, it looks almost beautiful. The body lies motionless, eyes closed, lips still. But up close, the flowers are already wilting. The clothes are damp from the body's own moisture. And beneath all the herbs and incense, the corpse is beginning to bloat. You can see the skin sloughing at the hairline. Why would anyone allow this? Because death was a process, not a point. The soul, called Calig or Anito, was believed to linger nearby for days or even weeks after death. It needed time. Time to detach. Time to hear the mourning. Time to witness its own farewell. In the meantime, the body was not something to be hidden. It was the anchor between the living and the dead, and it had to remain present, suffering and stinking though it may be. So, the family burned herbs. They sang sede, mourning poems passed down for generations. They gathered neighbors to offer rice cakes, betel nut and alcohol to the spirit. Children played in the same room. Dogs wandered in and out. Life continued around the dead, suffused with that thick, heady perfume of rot and ritual. Sometimes the body would lie there for 3 days, sometimes 7, sometimes longer, depending on the status of the dead and the readiness of the afterlife. And as the days passed, the scent would shift. It would go from sharp to sweet to something almost metallic. Insects would arrive any ones first, then bold, flies, then maggots if you waited too long. But again, this wasn't seen as horror. It was nature doing its job. Of course, not everyone handled it gracefully. There are accounts of children vomiting quietly behind the hut, of elders passing around sprigs of crushed mint to stuff up their nostrils, and even a few pragmatic folks who would coat their upper lips with ash or resin to block the stench. You imagine yourself among them now, standing close enough to feel the warmth of the smoking brazier, watching the curls of sap-scented smoke rise and coil around the face of the deceased. The gold glints in the firelight. The mouth is slightly open. Was that a twitch? Just your imagination. Probably. But superstition holds firm. If the body is not properly honoured, the anito might refuse to leave. It might cling to the hut, the family, the world of the living. So, the scent must be strong, the offerings must be abundant, and the process must not be rushed. In modern times, we call this unsanitary, barbaric even. But to the pre-colonial Filipinos, it was deeply spiritual. It was their duty, their burden, and their comfort. And it all begins with that clinging scent, the perfume of death. You take one last whiff, trying not to gag, and glance across the room. There, against the far wall, someone's sitting upright. You turn your gaze slowly to the far corner of the hut. There, propped unnervingly upright on a carved wooden chair, sits the dead. The glamorous illusion is a dignified tableau. The deceased, dressed in silks or fine woven cloth, arranged to appear peaceful, almost regales closed or sometimes, for the sake of ceremony, carefully painted over to look so. The chair is ornate, often carved with ancestral symbols or spirals, a throne for the honoured guest who can no longer speak. But the shocking reality. The corpse is rigid, sagging slightly with the weight of death. Skin stretches tight and pale. Sometimes the mouth hangs open, catching flies. The body, no longer breathes, yet it is seated upright like a living person. You might think this posture is about respect or status, and in a way, it is. But there's a far more visceral reason, and tied to the ever-present smell, the thick fog of rot you tried to escape earlier. The dead are placed upright so they once slump into pools of their own fluids. A body that lies flat for too long quickly begins to swell and leak, turning the sacred vigil into a horrid swamp of decay. Sitting upright slows this process, allowing the skin to dry a little, reducing the damp, sickly smell that sickens mourners. So you watch the dead sit there, a motionless spectator to their own farewell. Their stiff arms rest on carved armrests, or folded neatly in their laps. Around their necks hang necklaces of beads or polished shells. On their heads rest woven crowns or headbands made from dyed fibres. You can't help but notice how their eyes are sometimes left open, staring blankly ahead. It's not negligence. It's part of the ritual. The dead, after all, are still watching. They need to witness the ceremony, to see who comes and who goes, to know the names of those left behind. And the living respond in kind. Visitors come to pay respects, to tell stories aloud, to leave gifts. Children might peek under the sarong to glimpse a toe or finger. Elders speak quietly, weaving memories like blankets, and all the while the thick scent of burning herbs and flowers tries desperately to mask the undertow of decay. You wonder about the family's courage. To sit so close to death's unmistakable presence, to share air with a body already well into decomposition, to breathe the sour and sweet mixture that fills the room. Yet, it was a way to honour the dead fully, to keep them present and visible until the soul could safely depart, and to remind the living that death was never truly final. Because here's the thing, pre-colonial Filipinos believed that death was not an end but a passage. The soul might wander, nearby for days, needing guidance, and the body, even in decay, was a vessel to carry that connection. Sometimes, family members would gently clean the corpse, wiping away early signs of rot with fragrant oils or crushed leaves. Other times, they might paint the face with bright red or white pigment to restore a semblance of life. But that doesn't stop the flies, or the buzzing of insects that settle in the folds of fabric and skin. To you, it feels unnerving, almost macabre. But to those who lived it, it was comforting, a living goodbye, a final embrace of both beauty and the grotesque. It's an intimate moment, too intimate for many outsiders, and it sets the stage for what comes next, because bodies weren't just left on chairs indoors. They often had to be moved, sometimes high up and far away from the living altogether. The funeral ritual is only just beginning. You step outside now, the heavy air still thick with that smoky sweetness, and your eyes trace the ropes and bamboo poles, reaching up into the trees. The glamorous illusion is a quiet, dignified farewell, a final resting place where the body can be honored in peace, close to the spirits of the forest. But the shocking reality: the corpse is hoisted high above the ground, tied tightly to platforms or suspended in makeshift cages, left exposed to the merciless elements. Welcome to the world of the treehouse burial, a practice that would shock your modern sensibilities, yet held profound meaning for pre-colonial Filipinos. In many parts of the archipelago, especially among certain Visayan and northern Luzon groups, bodies were taken from the village and placed in the treetops, sometimes for months or even years. Imagine a body dangling several meters off the ground, swaying slightly in the wind, surrounded by birds, insects and curious animals. You probably once survived this, but try to imagine the scent again: heady mix of fresh forest, rotting flesh, and the occasional hint of resin from the smoke that lingers long after the last fire has died. The corpse is no longer cloaked in burning herbs here. Instead, it is left to marinate in the open air, the sun baking the skin, the rains washing away soft tissues, and scavengers picking at what they can. Why would anyone do this? Because in the pre-colonial Filipino worldview, the earth itself was a complex and sacred realm, and it was believed that bodies buried underground risked being defiled or trapped by malevolent spirits. Placing the dead high in the trees served several purposes. It protected the body from wild animals that prowled the forest floor, kept it away from the living who needed to move on with their lives, and allowed the soul an elevated perch closer to the spirit world. More than that, it was a practical approach to decomposition. Exposure to the sun and wind accelerated drying and prevented the typical rot that filled enclosed spaces with unbearable smells, but that didn't make it any less grotesque. You imagine the grieving families climbing up ladders or scaffolds to tend to the bodies, cleaning bones fallen from fragile joints, retying the body's wrappings, sometimes adding fresh offerings of food or cloth. You see the insects swarming, the occasional bird nesting nearby, the flesh darkening and peeling in the hot sun. For the living, it was a solemn, ongoing task, an act of love and reverence carried out in a world where death's boundaries were blurred and porous. Yet, if you had to spend your nights beneath that swaying tree platform, inhaling the scent of sun-baked decay mixed with earth and sap, it might just unnerve you. This isn't the sanitized image of funerals many think of. It's raw. It's exposed. It's wild. And the dead don't rest quietly here. The slow dance of decomposition continues, accompanied by the creaking of bamboo and the flutter of wings, a reminder that life and death are intertwined in a forest full of secrets and shadow. Soon, you'll see how the bodies are carefully prepared to endure this process, folded and bound with almost surgical precision, because the dead still have a role to play, even in their final pose. You watch as the villagers' skilled hands prepare the body for its next journey, folded with such precision. It almost looks like a living thing trying to curl back into the womb. The glamorous illusion is the delicate care lavished on the deceased, wrapped in hand-woven cloth and adorned with beads and shells. The body appears peaceful, fetal, and somehow Surinese if it's simply sleeping, waiting for rebirth. But the shocking reality: the corpse is folded tight, sometimes painfully so, into a fetal position, arms and legs pressed close, every joint bent sharply, almost as if it's trying to squeeze back into life's beginning. The bindings cut into the skin, if the skin was still soft. The tension in the ropes is enough to make you wonder if the body might suffocate if it could breathe at all. Why such extreme folding? This fetal posture wasn't arbitrary. It symbolized a return to the origin, the womb of the earth. Folding the body like a child was a powerful metaphor for death as a form of rebirth, a cycle that linked the living and the dead. The tight wrapping also made the corpse easier to carry, especially when it needed to be moved to treetops or caves for burial. But it's not just symbolic. This extreme bundling slowed decomposition in unexpected ways, limiting airflow and exposure, keeping the body compact and somewhat protected from scavengers and the elements. You imagine yourself there, famous tracing the taut fabric ropes, pulling the odds close to the chest, the legs curled tight as they had fallen. It's a strange comfort and a disturbing constraint all at once. Some say the dead struggled in these bindings if they could. Others believed it helped the soul find peace. The community watched as the body was wrapped, sometimes with whispered prayers or chanting. The family's mourning was visible in every knot and fold, every pressed leaf or handful of herbs tucked inside the bindings. Still, you wonder, how did it feel to live with these tightly wrapped bodies, to smell their slow decay every day? To know they were bound not only in cloth but also in ritual, a last attempt to contain death's chaos. This tight embrace between the living and the dead was a physical and spiritual necessity. it maintained a fragile order amid the messiness of death. Soon, you'll see how these tightly bound bodies were not just left on the ground, but often hung like fruit in the air, swinging quietly in the breeze, marked by time and nature's slow hand. Now, your eyes follow the ropes climbing even higher, beyond the reach of the forest floor, to where the carved coffins hang like strange fruit from the cliffs themselves. The glamorous illusion. These coffins, called balawa or kamanakan, are beautiful works of art meticulously carved from hardwood, decorated with intricate geometric patterns or ancestral symbols. They dangle like treasures, each one a testament to the status and respect commanded by the dead inside. Seen from afar, they shimmer in the sunlight, seeming almost to float above the earth, a serene resting place that commands awe. But the shocking reality. These coffins sway and creak in the wind, often several meters above ground, exposed to the harsh elements: rain, sun, wind, and to scavengers. The bodies inside are not embalmed or preserved with chemicals. Instead, they are left to undergo natural decomposition while dangling precariously, turning into grotesque wind chimes swinging against the rocky cliffs. You imagine standing beneath one of these coffins, the heavy scent of drying wood mingling with the faint but unmistakable odor of decay drifting down on the breeze. The occasional creak of the coffin's hinges, the rattle of dried bones shifting within, and the dull thud of insects burrowing into the wood are all part of the eerie soundscape. Why place the dead so? Dangling like offerings in the sky. In the pre-colonial Filipino worldview, death and the afterlife were deeply connected to the natural world. Elevating the dead was a way of physically bringing them closer to the spirit realm, believed to be located in the skies or mountains. It also kept the bodies safe from terrestrial threats, wild animals and curious humans alike, and prevented contamination of sacred village spaces. These hanging coffins also served as constant reminders to the living death is ever present, looming above and around you as inescapable as the wind. At night, under the moonlight, you might catch shadows shifting inside the coffins, the bodies moving subtly as decomposition progresses. Some tribes even believed the spirits of the dead might awaken briefly, swaying gently in the breeze, watching over the village below. It's a haunting vision that blurs the line between respect and horror. Soon, you'll learn about the next step in preserving the dead. Slow, roasting them over fire to keep decay at bay, a method as fascinating as it is unsettling. You follow the scent again this time, the sharp tang of smoke mingled with something far heavier, almost like burnt flesh and spices simmering in a distant kitchen. In the mountainous villages of northern Luzon and some parts of Mindoro, death takes on a smoky transformation. The glamorous illusion. The dead are honored with a slow, reverent smoking process, a kind of sacred cookery designed to preserve their form. The body is carefully prepared, wrapped in cloth, then placed over smoldering fires that emit fragrant smoke from hardwoods and aromatic leaves. This ritual can last days, a solemn rite that the living perform to protect the soul and body alike. But the shocking reality. This is slow roasting at its rawest. The corpse, exposed to smoke and heat for extended periods, darkens and dries, the skin toughening into a leathery shell. The smell is pungent and unsettling blend of charred flesh, resin, and herbs. The process can look almost like cooking meat, with the body simmering slowly, turning shades of brown and black as fat renders and muscles harden. You imagine standing beside the fire, feeling the heat on your face, inhaling the bitter, acrid smoke that stings your eyes and clings to your clothes. The air tastes thick with resin and burnt wood, a far cry from the floral perfumes used in other rituals. Why do this? The logic here is practical and spiritual. In a humid tropical environment, burial underground risks rapid decay and disease. Smoking the body slows decomposition and helps protect the village from miasma, invisible, poisonous vapors believed to cause illness. At the same time, the process is seen as a kind of purification, cleansing the soul's passage to the afterlife. Family members stay close, tending the fire, adding wood and herbs, murmuring prayers or singing laments as the body is transformed. The slow roasting becomes a communal act of devotion, a final gift to the departed. Yet, for all its reverence, it's undeniably unsettling watching flesh darken and dry, smelling the unmistakable scent of burning skin and bones. The boundary between care and consumption blurs here. The dead are both honored and altered, preserved yet irrevocably changed. You breathe deeply and step back, the smoky haze settling into your lungs like a reminder that death is never clean or simple. And this ritual is just one of many ways the pre-colonial Filipinos embraced the messiness of mortality. Soon, you'll glimpse the profound and painful sacrifices mourners made to honor their dead, actions that bound grief and blood in a ritual dance as old as time. You're pulled inside again, this time to a space thick with quiet pain and the faintest metallic tang where grief literally bleeds into ritual. The glamorous illusion, mourning as solemn, silent reverence, tears, prayers, the gentle holding of hands. But the shocking reality. Some family members mark their grief with sharp blades, slicing their skin to draw blood as a sacrificial offering to the dead. This blood is not wasted. It is sacred, a tangible token meant to comfort the departed soul, to pay a price for safe passage to the afterlife. Imagine peeking through a curtain and seeing a mother or brother pressing a sharpened coconut shell shard against their forearm or palm, the slow drip of crimson staining the floor. The blood is caught in small dishes, sometimes mixed with water or crushed herbs, then poured over the grave or into fire, carried as an offering to the spirits. Why such a painful tradition? In pre-colonial Philippine belief, blood was life's essence, the most potent gift one could give. The act of drawing blood connected the mourner physically and spiritually to the dead, the sacrifice showing loyalty and love so strong it hurt. It was believed this price eased the soul's journey, appeased restless spirits, and kept malevolent forces at bay. You might shudder, picturing the quiet winces, the whispered chants, the mingling of pain and devotion. It's a brutal tenderness, an intimate exchange of suffering that words cannot capture. Yet, this was not seen as barbarism but a deeply meaningful act, one that reaffirmed the bonds between the living and the dead. Family members often wore their wounds proudly, scars a testament to their devotion and grief. And the communal sharing of this pain brought solace, reminding everyone that death is a burden carried together. From here, the night's rituals stretch longer. You'll soon find yourself sharing a mat with a corpse for days, whispering stories to a face long cold. As the boundaries between life and death grow ever thinner, you slip past the low-hung bamboo partition and into the main room of the hut, where the air has grown thick with the mingled smells of sleeping mats, lingering incense and decay. A woven banig lies on the floor beside the body, indistinguishably close. Tonight, you'll share that sleeping space. The glamorous illusion is one of peaceful vigil, mourners lying beside the body in hushed solidarity, offering gentle warmth and whispered prayers. It feels intimate, even comforting, a collective embrace in the quiet hours before dawn. Candles gutter low, their soft glow flickering across the corpse's still face, lending it a strange serenity. But the shocking reality. You're about to lie down next to a corpse that's already begun its descent into rot. Its skin, once supple, is stiffening, drying into a cracked, leathery texture. Every breath you take brings the faint whisper of bacterial life at work, the weight of death pressing close. As the hut's humidity settles overnight, the body will exude moisture, the sticky sweat of decomposition collecting in its folds, seeping into the mat's fibers. Cooler, midnight temperatures prick the skin, and you'll feel the corpse's chill creep across the floor, a reminder that life and death share the same space here. Why would anyone do this? In pre-colonial Filipino belief, the soul of the departed doesn't immediately depart the body. Instead, it hovers nearby, drawn to the familiar rhythms of its former life, the smell of home, the voices of loved ones, the soft comfort of a shared hearth. By sleeping beside the corpse, the family provides the soul with the reassurance it needs to move on peacefully. It's a transitional cocoon, a final act of hospitality before the soul journeys beyond. Mourning isn't a spectator sport. It's an embodied experience. You lie down and feel the corpse's presence in every sense, the slight rasp of its breathless exhalations on the morning breeze, the stench that intensifies as darkness deepens, and the occasional soft pop as connective tissues give way. Villagers murmur legends to the body in the night, stories of past victories, lullabies once sung in childhood, and gentle prods of humour to coax the soul. Children, brave or foolish, might crawl close to whisper silly jokes, hoping for a twitch or sign that the dead are listening. Elders stroke the corpse's hair, it's become brittle and dry, and place fresh garlands of jasmine at its side, their petals pale in the candlelight. If you had to share a mat with a living person who snores, it's one thing. But imagine your slumber broken by the subtle scent of liquefying tissues, the clack of mandibles as insects scuttle beneath the sarong, the unnerving sensation of something shifting just beyond sight. Your eyes flutter open to the shape beside you, and for a moment you're unsure if it's dreaming or dead. This ritual could last 9 nights, sometimes more, if the family deemed it necessary. Each dawn brings fresh offerings, bowls of rice, small fish, betel nut, and palm wine left by the corpse's head. You rise in the cool pre-dawn light, your body stiff, your senses saturated with grief and rot, and yet you return that evening, compelled by duty and love. It's a brutal tenderness, a corporeal communion with death, that trains you to accept decay as part of life's tapestry. And there's a practical side too. By keeping the body at home, the family safeguards the corpse against theft. Valuable items buried with the dead might tempt grave robbers or against wild animals that lurk at the fringes of the village. It also ensures that when the time comes for final interment, whether in a cave, a tree, or a hanging coffin, the body remains intact, its bones strong and its form recognizable. Still, you can't help but shiver as you roll your mat close, one last time. The hut is still except for the soft murmur of outriggers creaking outside, and the body beside you seems almost alive in the darkness. Every ragged breath of wind through the cracks in the walls a reminder of the lungs that no longer draw air. What's next? In many cases, the rituals become more perilous and more intimate when the deceased is a mother who died carrying new life. You might think pregnancy would soften these rites, make them gentler. Instead, they can take a sharp, surgical turn. Soon, you'll see how the fate of a pregnant dead differs when the body holds not just one but two souls, and ancient beliefs demand a delicate, shocking ceremony that few could bear to witness. You step into the hushed chamber of the bereaved family, a room now overshadowed by grief and a half-glimpsed secret. There on a raised bamboo platform thick with soft mats and blankets lies the body of the woman who died, with new life already stirring within her. Around her, the air feels different, heavier, laden with both sorrow and an almost electric anticipation. The glamorous illusion is that of maternal reverence, the woman draped in embroidered silks, her swollen belly adorned with fresh garlands of sampaguita and tuberose. Loved ones sit in respectful silence, offering bowls of sweet rice porridge and palm wine to her in prayerful tribute. A hush falls as the wind stirs the lantern's flame, casting her silhouette in soft relief. But the shocking reality is far more graphic and unsettling. In many pre-colonial communities, when a pregnant woman died, her body became both vessel and responsibility. To ensure the safe passage of both her soul and that of her unborn child, the family performed a precise ritualized birth. They would make a ceremonial incision through the woman's abdomen, extract the fetus if it had not yet come free, and treat it as a separate spirit in need of its own funerary rites. Imagine watching attendants, often elder women skilled in birth rituals, gently part the pale silk, revealing skin stretched taut over ribs, and then, with solemn reverence, cutting through flesh to retrieve the limp infant. Why such a grisly procedure? Because in the belief system of these ancestral communities, a soul's journey required care appropriate to its state. A pregnant woman was two souls in one, the one who had lived and the one who had never breathed air. If the fetus were buried intact inside her, that emerging soul might be trapped, unable to find its way into the afterlife, or worse, return as a restless spirit to haunt the living. Extracting the child was a way to honor both lives, giving the mother a proper send-off and the unborn a ceremonial welcome and farewell. Sensory details here are relentless, the faint coppery tang of pooled blood on the mat, the hushed murmur of prayers in a language older than written script, and the soft pop of membranes as the fetus emerges. The air feels cool despite the tropical heat, as if the body's chill seeps into the entire hut. Attendants wrap the tiny form in fresh cloth, anoint it with oils crushed from jasmine and ginger, then place it in a miniature woven coffin, an image both tender and grotesque. Nearby, the mother's legs lie slightly parted, her expression locked in an eternal, gentle smile, as if unaware of the parting that her body now undergoes. It's a shocking blend of compassion and pragmatism. There's no squeamishness in there, icily solemn duty. They treat the woman's body with utmost care, stroking her hair back from her face, anointing her temples with turmeric paste to ward off vengeful spirits. Then, once the fetus is laid to rest in its own tiny coffin, often hung in a low tree or hidden in a niche within the village, a final ritual reconnects mother and child, a blessing chant that calls both spirits forward, guiding them along separate paths. For you, this may feel like a violation, an affront to what you consider sacred. But to them, it's the ultimate act of maternal love and communal responsibility, ensuring that neither soul is left behind by ancient misfortune or malevolent forces. The dual funeral underscores a belief in the fragility of life's transition points, birth and death entwined in a single ceremony. This procedure is whispered about in modern retellings, often labelled barbarous, yet within the original context, it reveals a nuanced understanding of life's thresholds. The vigil continues, afterward for both coffins, with villagers taking turns offering rice cakes and betel nut, chanting lullabies for the child and mourning songs for the mother. The scent of burning kamagong shavings drifts through the door, a bitter reminder that preservation comes at a cost. And even as you reel from the sight, the villagers press on with the rest of the funeral cycle, preparing graves or niches, singing laments that merge the two spirits into a final chorus. The community stands unwavering, bound by grief and ritual, forging a path for both souls into the unknown. There's no respite here, no hiding from the interplay of birth and death, creation and decay. And it sets the stage for another haunting custom, the practice of following a respected chief or beloved spouse into death itself, a living burial that defies all your preconceptions of loyalty and fear. Soon, you'll witness how some were buried alive, honoured in death by those who believed the journey should be shared. You follow a narrow path beyond the village, led by hushed footsteps and the steady torchlight's flicker. Ahead, a low mound of earth marks the chief's grave, yet it's not the final resting place you expect. The glamorous illusion here is devotion, taken to its highest form. Loyal retainers and beloved spouses willingly join their master in death, ensuring his journey is never solitary. They too wear their finest garment, hand-woven cloth dyed in deep reds and blacks, beaded jewellery glinting in the firelight. Before dawn, mourners sing soft odes, praising the chief's valour and wisdom, while wives and servants prepare for the ultimate act of loyalty. But the shocking reality: these chosen few are buried alive feet first, bound tightly, buried in a narrow pit dug beside the chief's coffin. Imagine watching them lowered into the earth, their heads disappearing beneath the soil, their feet wrapped in fragrant herbs jutting skyward like the petals of a strange, inverted flower. You hear the clink of clay jars containing rice and water, their last meal placed into the grave. Then the soft pat of earth as the first shovelfuls cover their bodies, followed by a low chant that drowns out any cries. This burial is not instantaneous. The mourners leave the pit partially open for a time long enough to hear the faint rustle of cloth or the muffled whisper of a last prayer. Sometimes, the living pause at the grave's edge, leaning close to catch a final breath or a broken word. Then, with a solemn shovelful, the earth covers the opening, sealing the living with the dead. You might wonder, how could anyone accept such a fate? In pre-colonial Filipino belief, the afterlife was an extension of this world's social order. A chief could not rule alone in death. His retinue ensured his court remained intact. This was seen as the highest honour, to continue service even beyond the grave. The volunteers, often noble women or close retainers, understood that their deaths would cement their loyalty forever, binding their souls to his in the spirit realm. From a practical standpoint, this practice also maintained cosmic balance. The chief's power, believed to be potent and unpredictable after death, needed containment. The living burial served as both tribute and harness, ensuring the chief's spirit remained tethered to his community rather than roaming free as a restless force. But the sensory truth here is unsettling. As the last handful of earth falls, the smell of fresh soil mingles with that ever-present hint of rot rising from the coffin beneath. The air grows heavy, damp with the promise of decay. You can almost taste the earth's minerals, feel the cool humidity pressing in. Not far away, villagers stand around bonfires of burning kamagong shavings, trying to repel the smell, to assert control over what they've just unleashed. In the days that follow, the ground above the mass grave becomes a focal point of reverence and fear. Offerings of rice cakes, betel nut, and fresh fish are left there each dawn, accompanied by the constant burning of resinous herbs. The smoke carries the heavy, sweet scent that masks the deeper stench of buried flesh, through signatures of death intertwined. Villagers avoid walking too close to the pit's edge, wary of the buried soul's power. Some claim they still hear faint tapping or the rubbing of cloth beneath the earth, as if the buried living struggle for air. Children dare each other to fetch a thrown coin from the grave's rim, their laughter nervous, eyes darting for movement. This practice, horrifying to outsider eyes, was imbued with solemn respect. It raised profound questions: who truly belongs in the afterlife? How far will the living go to honour the dead? And at what cost to humanity's most fundamental instinct, survival? As the days turn to weeks, the unquiet ground begins to settle. The vegetation slowly reclaims the mound, grasses sprout anew, and the smell of fresh earth returns, tinged, however, forever with that ancient whisper of decay hidden just inches below. The chief's lineage, now stronger in death, continues to watch over the village. But death's rituals don't stop there. Even after such ultimate sacrifices, there remains the final, intimate task of tending to the bones themselves, a process as methodical as it is macabre. Soon, you'll discover how the dead are exhumed, boiled and reassembled, turning bones into relics that speak louder than words. You step into the courtyard at dawn, drawn by the low roar of boiling water and the clatter of wooden mallets. A long, iron cauldron bubbles over charcoal embers thick with steam that smells of grease, herbs, and something faintly surren echo of rot finally turned to relic. The glamorous illusion here is the dignified exhumation, bones carefully gathered after months or years underground, then respectfully cleaned and prepared for reburial or display. Villagers speak of honouring ancestors by keeping their remains close, each fragment a link in an unbroken chain of memory. But the shocking reality. You watch as men lift bleached bones from the earth, their hands slick with damp soil. They dump them into the cauldron, where an herbal decoction turmeric, gava leaves and bits of burned camagong bark hisses and spits as it coagulates the last scraps of flesh. Steam rises in pungent clouds that tug at your throat, carrying the fierce tang of blood and the cloying sweetness of tropical wood smoke. Here's how it unfolds. First, they unearth the grave, exposing tangled cloth and brittle twigs. The earth holds its breath, releasing a last sigh of decay as you brush away clumps of loam. A shoulder blade emerges mottled and fragile. A rib looks like a curved shard of ivory. Each bone still carries a faint remnant of the body's former warmth, a ghostly heat that seems impossible. The bones are loaded into the cauldron in batches. You lean in closer, the steam dappling your skin, and feel the heat like the living breath of those ancestors. As the water boils, foam gathers at the surface, a grey, viscous, flecked with hair and sinew. Young men dip long wooden paddles, sloshing the liquid to crack the remaining bits of tissue free. Each stir releases a new wave of scent, metallic for blood, musty for earth, smoky for charred bark. After hours of simmering, the bones are transferred to shallow pits lined with banana leaves. There, they're scrubbed with bundles of grass or rough palms dipped in ash and scented oils, buffing away stains until each piece gleams ghost white. The air is thick with a mix of scents, the sharp sting of ash, the herbal sweetness of turmeric, and beneath it all, that abiding undercurrent of rot finally banished by ritual. Why go through such a gruesome ordeal? In the pre-colonial Filipino worldview, the soul's connection to its ancestors' bones was vital. Clean bones ensured a stable link between the living and the dead, protecting the community from curses or restless spirits. This process, called titim ang, was both purification and preparation. It freed the body from its earthly shell while preserving its essence for a final resting place, often a communal ossuary or an elaborately carved wooden chest. The cleaned bones were then reassembled in a symbolic gesture of renewal. Neatly arranged by size and shape, they formed new skeletons or were placed in ornate boxes alongside offerings of rice, betel nut, and miniature tools representing the deceased's life. Sometimes the skulls were even fitted with small gold ornaments, glossed in resin to catch the sunlight during festival processions. Yet for all its reverence, the act remains undeniably visceral. You imagine yourself tracing the arc of a femur, how smoothly it curves, how cold it feels against your fingers, no totally divorced from flesh, a ledger of mortality reduced to bones. Insects buzz lazily around the orphaned bits of cloth, picking at the last traces of protein. Nearby, elders sniff sharply and fan the air, with woven mats, trying to keep the powerful aroma from overwhelming the space. When everything is perfected, the bones are carried in procession wrapped in cloth scented with sandalwood and coupled to their final repository. The villagers sing low chants, striking bamboo poles in rhythmic beats that echo against the limestone walls of caves or beneath grand wooden ossuaries perched on high ledges. Smoke coils from burning herbs, reasserting that familiar perfume of ceremony over the harsher odors of the preparation. This is a ritual of reclamation. What once was swallowed by earth, now is retrieved, cleaned, and reborn as a silent testament to lineage and continuity. The bones speak louder than any monument. They are proof that the dead remain woven into the fabric of daily life. But among all these relics, one object stands out above the rest, the skull. Polished, painted, or gilded, it becomes more than a remnant. It's a status symbol, talisman of power and heritage. Soon, you'll cradle one of these skulls yourself and glimpse how families carry their ancestors into festivals, wielding them like trophies to remind the living of their proud history and stern obligations. You hold it in your hands now, cradling the smooth, ivory curve of a human skull. The surface is polished to a gleam so cold it stings your fingertips, and when you bring it closer, you detect the faintest whisper of incense and Limean attempt to absolve the centuries-old stains of death. The glamorous illusion is the skull's transformation into an almost sacred object, gilded with gold leaf, decorated with bright pigments or wrapped in colourful cloth and beads. It rests atop a pedestal in the village plaza during festivals, catching torchlight and drawing the eyes of young and old alike. To outsiders, it appears as a reverent relic, a totem of ancestral wisdom and protection. But the shocking reality: this polished trophy once belonged to a flesh and blood persona warrior, a leader, aura, healer whose head was separated from their body as part of a grisly tradition. After the bones were boiled and cleaned, skilled artisans would carve intricate designs into the cranium, hollow out parts of the base to insert offerings of rice, betel nut, or finely ground turmeric, then seal the access point with wax or resin. Sometimes, porcelain beads were set into the eye sockets like eyes that never close. The end result is mesmerizing yet macabre, a face that never smiles, never blinks, forever frozen in death. Why would a community engage in such a practice? In the pre-colonial Filipino belief system, skulls held immense power. They were thought to house the spirit's most potent essence called banakan to confer strength, knowledge, or fertility when honored properly. Displaying a polished skull at a communal gathering was not just an act of reverence, it was a declaration of lineage. Noble families used these skulls as status symbols, paraded during harvest festivals or rites of passage to remind everyone of their ancestors' achievements. A polished skull could protect a village from harm, ensure bountiful crops, or lend courage to warriors heading into battle. It was the ultimate family heirloom, potent and unyielding. Yet beneath the polished exterior lies a reality steeped in decay. The process of obtaining a head was neither peaceful nor respectful by modern standards. Some skulls came from enemies, vanquished in raids, trophies taken to prove martial prowess. Others were collected during special ceremonies when the village exhumed long-buried ancestors specifically to create these relics. The act of opening graves, boiling bones, and dismembering the body was itself a form of communion, a final negotiation between life and death, honor and horror. Picture yourself at dusk in the plaza, the smell of copal incense heavy in the air, drums beating a slow pulse, dancers weaving around you. On a raised bamboo platform lies the skull adorned with flowers, betel, leaves, and even strands of the original owner's hair preserved in resin. Elders chant genealogies, reciting each name linked to this skull, weaving threads that bind past to present. The crowd feels its power. Some reach out to touch it, hoping to absorb a fragment of its spirit. As you press your palm against the cool bone, you half expect to feel warmth and echo of the life that once animated it, but find only icy stillness. And what of the families who keep these skulls? They treat them as living relatives, offering daily prayers, tidbits of food, sips of palm wine placed gently on the forehead. Skulls are stored in ornate boxes when not on display, wrapped in soft cloth to preserve their delicate carvings. In the quiet of night, some swear they hear low murmur spirits conversing, offering guidance, or perhaps simply reliving old memories. But for you, the feeling is unnerving. You're acutely aware that this object, as beautiful as it is, bears the scars of death, the fine fractures, at the sutures, the tiny pores once home to flesh and blood, the hollow orbits now empty and silent. In the dark, you imagine those empty eyes watching you, holding secrets you can't fully comprehend. This veneration of skulls also highlights a broader tension in pre-colonial Filipino rites, the interplay of beauty and repulsion, reverence and revulsion. The shiny surface hides deep truths, bones that once held a beating heart, that once supported laughter or tears. Turning these remnants into artifacts speaks to both the desire to control death's chaos and the willingness to confront it head-on. As the festival winds down and the skull is returned to its resting place, the incense smoulders into ash and the last drum beats fade. But the relic's presence lingers, a reminder that ancestors never truly depart and that in death, the boundary between honor and horror is often razor-thin. From here, the story takes a quieter, more intimate turn. The widow who shares her life and her grief with the body of her husband long after the burial. In that soft, unsettling ritual, love and decay intertwine in a way few outsiders dare to imagine. Soon, you'll witness a scene where grief becomes a long-term cohabitation. You find yourself drawn back to the family hut once more, but this time it's different. The air feels charged with a curious blend of longing and revulsion. There, in the center of the room, sits the widow, her silhouette illuminated by the dying embers of a single lantern. Beside her, resting on a small raised pallet, lies the body of her husband, preserved with the same smoking ritual you saw before. In the corner, a basket holds fresh jasmine, laid out in delicate coils like gentle halos. A bowl of palm wine and a plate of rice cakes rest on a low table. The widow, dressed in mourning black, moves with slow, deliberate grace. She brushes a strand of hair from her face, revealing eyes that glisten with tears, and then she reaches out to stroke these, corpse's cheek. The glamorous illusion is heartbreakingly tender, a woman's last moments with her beloved, a serenade to their shared life and a final caress to a face that still feels familiar under her fingers. Love lingers in each movement, as though affection alone could restore warmth to those cold, unresponsive features. But the shocking reality is impossible to ignore. The flesh she touches is toughened into leather by smoke and time, the skin etched with the fine cracks of drying decay. Every stroke sends tiny flakes drifting down, like pale snow over the woven mat. The mouth, once capable of laughter and speech, is frozen in a half-open sneer. The eyes don't blink, they don't watch. Yet the widow treats them as though they might. Why would anyone share such an intimate gesture with the dead? In pre-colonial Filipino belief, the bond between husband and wife was not severed by death. The widow's role was as much about guiding the husband's soul to its next destination as it was about grieving. By maintaining physical closeness, stroking his face, sharing his space as she reassured his spirit that love endured beyond the mortal plane. This tactile communion was thought to ease his passage, to keep his memory alive in both worlds. You watch her lean closer, pressing her forehead against his, whispering words you cannot discern. The scent of jasmine mingles with the heavier perfume of smouldering camagong bark. Palm wine fumes add a crisp sweetness to the mix. Her tears fall onto his chest, hissing softly as they meet the still warm surface of his tobacco-brown skin. The family sits in silent respect, witnessing this nightly ritual. The children have been sent away. No one wants their eyes tainted by this intimate dance of life and death. The elders remain, murmuring chants about fidelity and the unbroken circle of partnership. They light new incense when the first batch fades, and at times softly offer her a sip of rice porridge, a reminder of the world beyond, the sorrow. Yet even in this ceremony of love, decay is never far away. You glimpse the edge of his sarong lifting slightly as flies gather at the corners of his mouth. A low buzz hums through the hut. The widow seems to sense it. She pauses, plucks at the air, shakes a sprig of crushed mint in front of her face, then smothers a guilty smile before returning to her vigil. No one speaks of the smell. It's the unmentionable undercurrent of every ritual. But you feel it thick and sweet and unavoidable, like a secret truth pressing at the edges of the heart. This practice could last weeks, sometimes months, until the community deemed it time for final intimate. The widow's nightly visits would end only when the body was ready smoked long enough to halt most decay, bones firm enough not to crumble under grief's weight. Then, and only then, would she relinquish her husband to the next stage, carrying with her the memory of every caress. It's an unsettling intimacy. Grief made tangible, love made physical amid rot. Yet through this grotesque portrait, you see a tenderness that transcends your modern judgments. It speaks of devotion so deep that the widow could not bear to let go, of customs that wove together the living and the dead in a single tapestry of touch. Soon you'll witness one final struggle, how the living fought to keep the dead at bay, waving chicken blood and chanting incantations in a desperate bid to exorcise the reek and send the spirit on its way. You step into the clearing beyond the longhouse where smoke curls low over a woven mat, and the air hums with frantic energy. Villagers clad in painted bark cloth form a loose circle around the still figure of the corpse. Their faces are solemn but determined tonight. They will force the dead onward, banishing its lingering presence once and for all. The glamorous illusion here is a final, joyous send-off, incense rising in gentle spirals, mourners swaying in unison, drums beating a soft, beckoning rhythm. Feels like a communal release, an exultant celebration of life conquering death. White cloth banners flutter, and offerings of rice, fruit, and betel nut are arranged in neat piles, promising safe passage and honouring the departed. But the shocking reality is far more visceral. In one hand, a mourner holds a fresh, live chicken, its feathers still warm and its heart pounding. Another grips a bowl of dark, congealing blood drawn hours earlier from a pig or water buffaloes, if offering the very essence of life to the restless spirit. The chant rises, guttural, urgent, weaving words older than memory. With practiced precision, the blood is flicked toward the corpse, splattering across sun-dried cloth, soaking into the fibres. The chicken's neck is wrung in a quick, sharp motion. Its warm blood spatters in arcs that catch the torchlight. You witness the reek of death swirl into the ritual itself, becoming both target and fuel. The smell of iron-rich blood mingles with the corpse's sour perfume, creating a raw, electrifying haze. Eyes water, hazel-grained faces flex with concentration as they shout incantations meant to propel the spirit forward. Why such gruesome methods? In the pre-colonial Filipino worldview, a soul that lingered too long could harm the living, bringing sickness, misfortune, or restless hauntings. Blood, the life force, held the power to sever the tie between body and spirit. By anointing the corpse with fresh living blood, mourners symbolically transfer energy away from the dead, weakening its hold on the material world. The paltry sacrifice, quick and brutal, releases a final burst of vitality to shock the spirit into motion, sending it hurtling into the afterlife. As the chants crescendo, you sense the air shift. The villagers begin a stamping dance, their feet thudding in rhythmic unison, driving out the stagnant energy. Smoke from bundled herb sambong, damang maria, and crushed jinga rises thickly, its acrid tendrils meant to purify the space and obscure the corpse's heavy odor. Men wave flickering torches, creating a spinning cocoon of light around the body. Suddenly, a shriek rises, a mournful cry from the elders, calling the spirit by name one last time. A child trembles at the edges of the circle, clutching a small bell, ready to toll it if the soul tries to linger. The dance quickens, the blood flicks grow wild, and the scent crescendos into a heady swirl of rot, smoke, and living life force. You feel it then, a strange energy flits through the crowd, as if something unseen has finally been unbound. The air lightens, as though a weight has lifted. The circling mourners slow, the torches dip, and the blood-soaked cloth on the corpse's chest begins to dry, the congealed droplets darkening into black. The final note of the chant hangs in the air, a whispered release. In that moment of stillness, the villagers step back. The corpse once the centre of gravity becomes simply an object, its pull on the living severed. They gather the remaining blood and feathers, burning them in a small pyre to send any lingering energy skyward. The pungent smoke rises rapidly, carrying the last of the foul perfume into the night. And then it's over. The mourners drift away, many collapsing into the arms of kin, tears mixing with sweat. The clearing falls silent, save for the crackling of the herb's embers and the soft rustle of night insects. You inhale deeply, tasting the residue of that wild, brutal ceremony, metallic, acrid, exhilarating. The smell of decay is finally subdued, replaced by the sharper tang of fresh life and burning smoke. A hush settles over the land, and you realize the spirit has moved on, at last free. This ritual of exorcism is the climax of a long, intimate dance between the living and the dead, an echo of every whispered chant, every drop of blood, every breath of smoke. It reminds you that in this world of ancient beliefs, death is not simply an endpoint, but a doorway that must be forced open, with all the power life can muster. Soon you will see how, even after this brutal exorcism, the rituals endure not in grand spectacles but in subtle, everyday remembrances that carry the dead into daily life, sometimes forever. You return to the village long after the final exorcism, treading familiar paths now overgrown with grasses and wildflowers. The wind carries a softened hint of that once overpowering perfume, the echo of smoke and rot lingering like an old memory. You pause beside a mossy stone where offerings still sit, a cracked bowl of rice now sprouted with seedlings, a handful of faded blossoms, a splintered chicken bone half buried in the earth. The glamorous illusion is that funerals end with a single ceremony, a tidy conclusion marked by rites of exorcism or interment. In modern minds, death is boxed in time. You mourn, you bury, you move on. But the shocking reality in pre-colonial Philippines is that death's rituals can stretch indefinitely. There is no need. Closure, only a continuum of remembrance, a layered tapestry of ceremonies woven through months, years, sometimes generations. You wander to the communal ossuary carved into a limestone cliff. The entrance is framed by weathered statues of ancestors, their eyes hollow but watchful. Inside, bone bundles are arranged on shelves hewn into stone. Some are wrapped in bark cloth still painted with ancient pigments, others bear colourful beads or shells slipped between ribs. Skulls sit on lid benches, decorated anew each season, painted with floral motifs, adorned with fresh shell necklaces, crowned with woven wreaths. The air here is surprisingly cool, scented faintly of damp stone and mixed with the lingering resin of ceremonial herbs, and undercurrent that threads through every ritual you've witnessed. Why does this never end? Because in the ancestral worldview, the dead remain active participants in communal life. Ancestors protect the living, guide the village through droughts or raids, and ensure fertility in fields and families. In return, the living must continue to honour them. Each agricultural cycle, each change of season, demands a new set of offerings. Bone bundles are exhumed for cleaning, rewrapped in fresh cloth, anointed with oils of ginger and turmeric to stave off mold and moss. Skulls are polished until they shine, then returned to their shelves under soft torchlight. You see villagers climbing wooden scaffolds inside the ossuary, wiping bone dust from corners, replacing broken beads, whispering prayers barely audible over the drip of condensation. Children watch wide-eyed, learning the songs and chants by heart. Elders recount genealogies, tracing connections between the living and the ancestors whose bones they tend. Outside, festivals still centre on the dead. Processions wind through the rice paddies carrying bone bundles mounted on bamboo poles. Drums and flutes accompany dancers dressed in bark cloth dyed deep indigo. Offerings are placed at every crossroads, tiny shrines of shell, betel nut and palm wine left at stilted houses. Even daily life bears their imprint, a whispered greeting to the ancestors before dawn, a silent toast of rice wine before meals. The boundary between here and the spirit realm is porous. A sudden storm might signal a displeased ancestor, a bountiful harvest a sign of their blessing. When illness strikes, shamans consult bone bundles, invoking names whispered during long nights beside the ossuary. You realize that every act of remembrance carries the scent of rot and smoke you once struggled to endure. The same thick, sweet perfume, softened by time but never gone, clings to cloth wrappings and lingers in corners of huts. It reminds the living that decay and renewal are inseparable, that life cycle turns on the axis of memory. Even death itself becomes a ritual continuum never fully complete, always part of something larger than a single moment. And now, as you take one final look at the ossuaries, flickering torches, you sense the ancestors watching you back, silent guardians in bone and spirit, welcoming you into the endless dance of remembrance. Here, the world slows. The hammering of ceremonial drums fades into the soft rustle of palm fronds. Your heartbeat steadies. You feel the weight of all you've seen: the smoke-choked vigils, the hanging coffins, the polished skulls begin to settle like ash on the wind. Remember that scent, once sharp and clinging, now reduced to a gentle whisper in the breeze. Let it remind you that life and death weave together in every breath, every memory preserved by those who go before. There is no abrupt finality here, only a gradual fading, as rituals move from grand spectacle to quiet ritual. A bowl of rice left at dawn, a sprig of ginger tucked beneath a stone, a whispered name carried on the wind. Allow your senses to soften. Imagine the ossuary's cool stone, the hushed voices of villagers tending bones, the distant hum of cicadas at twilight. Let these images lull you, each one a link in the chain between worlds. You are part of this continuum now. Your remembrance joins theirs. The ancestors' breath stirs within you, a faint warmth against the cool night air. Close your eyes. Breathe in the softened perfume of memory. Breathe out and release your hold on time. Drift into the hush between rituals, where all stories meet and all journeys rest if only for a moment.